Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel, the Strategy Talks and Mechanics Guide series. On this episode, I wanted to talk about something that I think kind of semi-plagues the community as a whole, especially those of us on YouTube, and that just is the problems with the idea of Pokemon Sleep YouTube. Now, uh, this game is a very individual experience. There's no real interacting with other players, aside from there's the friends list, but that's very minimal amounts of interaction. The most amount of interaction you're going to get is just through the Pokemon Sleep community and anything that you see online. Well, um, that leads to every player's experience is drastically different from the next. So when we as creators make videos, it's ultimately from a perspective of what has worked for us. We can theorize about other things and run simulations in Rain on X and come up with calculations, and ultimately that can help us to theorize what would be reasonable for other players, what's the best option for other players. But when it comes to actually knowing what's best for your account, nobody is going to know that better than you. So take everything that we have, take everything that we say with a grain of salt, and take the concepts that we discuss and maybe apply them to your account, not necessarily the exact things. And I wanted to discuss that by showing a couple of problems with Pokemon Sleep, and things are going to differ as well, just based off of playstyle to playstyle, not even just the Pokemon in your box versus the Pokemon in your box. And that's very prevalent throughout the course of Pokemon Sleep. Now, to show that, I just wanted to kind of rib on a couple creators. Now, I'm not going to no harm meaned towards any of these creators. I love all these creators. They've done great things for the community. And the more people that are out there watching Pokemon Sleep content, the more people that are out there loving the game, which is ultimately what I want to see. I want to see community for the game, not necessarily for me. I don't want to see any hate cast upon these creators because they are doing great things for the game. And that's what I love about the game. I love the community. So any criticisms that I have for these creators are not out of a place of hatred or anything like that. It's more out of a place of just showing the flaws with the concept of Pokemon Sleep YouTube. It's a criticism of YouTube as a platform for Pokemon Sleep, not as a criticism towards the creators. Now, the first creator that I want to criticize is actually myself, because I figure what better way to start it off. I made this tier list not that long ago, and tier lists are innately flawed in Pokemon Sleep. iBenBrown actually made a video about that a while back. There's so many factors at play in this game. What's going to work and what's not going to work for every account is going to vary so much based off of playstyle, based off of the where you're at in the game, based off of whether you're free to play or premium. Like, there's so many different factors considered more ingredient focused versus berry focused. A single tier list cannot really capture the strength of Pokemon in this game or give any advice as to what is best in this game. Now, this is the tier list that I came up with. It's a great reflection of my ideas of the Pokemon that I think are particularly strong in the game. Now, some people disagree with this, and I actually led on to, after this point, I made a correction stream where I let chat go through and kind of correct what they thought might need, and let them convince me of changes that I should make to the tier list. So there were a few changes overall, but as a whole, there are too many ways to evaluate things, and making a tier list is innately flawed, and it just is a reflection of my thoughts on how strong certain Pokemon are. And I will admit, my weaknesses as a content creator, I very much so am a very late game player. I started playing day one, and I'm a much more, I'd say I'm a bit more passive about collecting and interacting with the app than a lot of other creators are. So that's kind of the mindset that I have when I'm looking at min-maxing the game. So I sometimes consider mono, but I don't swap the team all that often. So, like, there are weaknesses in the way that I play, and that may result in certain Pokemon doing better than other Pokemon that shouldn't otherwise be doing so well, and maybe some Pokemon that are doing worse that shouldn't otherwise be doing as bad as they are, in my viewpoint. And another flaw in my mindset is I'm very late game, so I don't think very much about the early game player. In fact, I tried making this video. This is a great freeze frame on me, and throughout the course of this video, I'm gonna be honest, this is one of my earlier videos. I am not very proud of this video. It was 6 months ago, and a lot of people said it was great. A lot of people gave me compliments, It's got 394 views. And I look back at it and I kind of cringe at it because I labeled it 10 tips for new players, but really it's more just like 10 tips for anyone getting into the game. Or not even getting into the game, just people playing the game in general. In fact, I actually kind of added in honestly for everyone. Because honestly, when I look back at the new player's experience after starting the sleepers, which I have this second phone here for, I realized that some of these tips aren't really that great of tips because, like, one of them, know your targets. That early in the game, everything's your target because whatever you can get your hands on that are good is just going to be good. Uh, okay, that one actually could be a good one for new players, but things like this. That's playstyle. There's one that I really testing things out. Good mons may be bad and bad mons may be good. Those are like the 2 points, and you can watch the video if you want. Go back. I think that they're not great tips for early game players, so I kind of cringe at this video looking back because I think that it's more for late game players that I added these tips. So flaws with my approach as a Pokemon Sleep YouTube content creator is discussing these things. And when I tried making a video for new players, it's an alright video. It's got good tips. It's just not the best for new players, and that's just because of where my head is at. Now, the next content creator that I really want to discuss was BroVinnie. And I'm just going to play this clip that I took of one of BroVinnie's newest videos. And I want you guys to try and think what the problem with it is here for me.
This could be a short video, because there's really not that much to say. Farfetch'd is necessary for leaks. It is really good at making leaks compared to other options. This could be a
Okay, now that I've gotten that clip out of the way, what do y'all think is my problem with this clip? The problem is that he's saying it is necessary. Farfetch'd is necessary. If you watched my video about Farfetch'd, you'll know that I very much so do not have this mindset. I think that this mindset comes from a place of BroVinnie. He, once again, great content creator, has very smart man, very great at looking at the game from a great lens of optimizing the game. However, I think he spends a lot of money on the game, and that leads to he has some opinions particularly about 16-pip Pokemon and legendaries, that he can hunt more. He can afford to hunt more, and I think he interacts with a lot of people like that. So that may lead towards him taking the more, no matter how many biscuits I throw at it, it's worth it. No matter how many biscuits I throw at it, it's worth it. But everybody that's not in that mindset, there's a much bigger expense to catching a Farfetch'd, to catching mono hunt Farfetch'd. And I think that that's the consideration that was left out with this, because he just said it is so much better, you have to catch it. Which is a reasonable thing to say if you have infinite biscuits. But for a much more realistic approach of the free-to-play players, or even just premium players that don't spend money to purchase biscuits on the game, Farfetch'd is a much more difficult thing to achieve, and investing in catching a Quackable and using that as a leak option, I've said it before, iBenBrown said it before, it's a reasonable thing to go with. It's not going to be nearly as good, but this is only going to be good if you can actually catch it with the mono list, which, good luck with that. If you luck into it, have fun with it, use it, but good luck with it if you actually want to try and hunt it. You probably will drive yourself insane before burning yourself out on the hunt, because you spent all your resources on the Farfetch'd. Now, the next creator, which is probably unfortunately going to be the creator that I rib on the most, is Lambo Sleeps. Now, I like Lambo Sleeps. I'm a pretty regular viewer of his content, but I had particular problems with the way that he presented Farfetch'd and Musharna, both of them, back when they were added on. He did an analysis of them, and I think the big problem with Lambo Sleeps is not necessarily that he's coming at it with a bad perspective. I think that he is a much more casual player than what is led on in his videos when he does reviews like this. He talks about the numbers and the data and the information behind them, sharing them with it, which is alright information to have. But when he does analysis and talks about the Pokemon, he says some things that, if you actually know the behind the scenes and how things work, it's not really true what he's saying. And I think that just comes out of place of he's very casual with it. He doesn't think about the game necessarily too much, so he doesn't necessarily know how the nitty-gritty behind the scenes works. You can still listen to his opinions. He still has opinions, and they're still valid opinions. But I would take what he says with a grain of salt when doing these sorts of Rain on X analysis on new Pokemon because, well, you'll just see here as I go through them. So the first clip that I brought forward is in reference to Farfetch'd, so I'll just show it.
Let's look at that ingredient finding rate. Ooh, 16% feels kind of low. Kind of low, but that skill trigger rate is really high. What was the skill triggers? Charge strength? Ooh. Yikes. Okay, well, I mean, at least it's the guaranteed amount of charge strength. It's not the range, but still.
So the big thing that I wanted to point out there, first thing, 16% is on the lower end of things. And 4.3% is a little bit on the higher end as far as being a non-skill specialist goes. But realistically, you can't say if a skill rate is high unless you're looking at what its main skill is, because every single main skill in the game is going to have different average skill rates. Additionally, whether or not an ingredient rate or skill rate is high or low also depends upon the frequency, because their output of ingredients and their output of skills is a function that is it's a combination of the skill rate and the frequency together. And he just talks about these numbers and says it's high or it's low. Ooh, that's rough. That's not the full picture. Because I believe Gengar, let me double check this. Gengar has a 16% ingredient rate as well. But nobody really, it's got 16.1, just a little bit higher, basically the same thing. But it has a much faster frequency to account for that. So the 16% is a terribly low ingredient rate, but only because Farfetch'd also has a pretty slow frequency. Now, additionally, the other thing that I had a problem with this clip that shows that he's a bit more casual player that doesn't understand the behind the scenes is what he says here at the end.
But still, amount of charge strength, it's not the range. I mean, at least it's the guaranteed amount of charge strength. It's not the range, but still.
At least it's not the guaranteed amount of charge strength, or at least it is the guaranteed amount of charge strength, not the range. If you've been following min-maxing for a while, anything to do with this game, you'll know that the fixed amount of charge strength is strictly worse than the variable amount. When it comes to across the course of a day, if a proc happens enough, you're going to see things trend towards the average amount quite heavily, especially when looking at it for the course of a whole week, as we do in Pokemon Sleep. The more instances of an event that happens, the less the randomness has an impact. So really, the RNG aspect of the ranged amount has little to do with how much the skill actually outputs. You're not going to be at the mercy of RNG too much on this last final thing. You'll get more at the mercy of RNG when it comes to the skill trigger rate. That's the much more important factor. But variable charge strength is stronger than fixed. So I don't know what he was trying to say at the end of this clip here, because as you can see, fixed 3002 strength. This variable 1501 to 6004. If you add those two together, which is kind of roughly how the math works out, and then divide by 2 to average it, it would just be all the different possible ones in between. There have been studies and stuff by people in the subreddit and on Rainon, and they've done studies to prove this concept. Roughly every result is weighted equally. In that case, then the average comes out to be roughly 3,752, which is significantly more by about 750 than the fixed amount. So him saying that it's the fixed amount, not the ranged, at least that's the case, that's worse. Granted, it's on an ingredient specialist, so we really don't care at the core of things, but it was just a misstatement by him. And that's where I'm saying he's a bit more of a casual player that doesn't necessarily know these particular concepts. Now, next quote that I got from him.
Really don't like that the skill trigger rate is so high for a skill that I do not care for at all. So that's fun. Really don't.
Once again, I don't know why he particularly cares about this. I feel like he's just kind of filling in the air a little bit. It doesn't matter if it's high. There's no single skill in the game that is bad to proc more of. He says that he doesn't like that it's so high. If it was 100%, you wouldn't be hating that. It'd be procking the skill a bunch. The skill's not going to hurt you. It's not going to be bad that it's there. So it's just an added aspect to consider on the Pokemon. And once again, 4.3% really isn't all that much. If we compare it to other Pokemon across the board, it's about the same as a Toxicroak. Actually, it is the same as a Toxicroak. It's less than a Abomasnow, which Abomasnow has the variable charge strength, which is better than the fixed. Vikavolt also has the fixed charge strength and a higher frequency, yet it has a higher skill trigger rate. Meganium and Feraligatr both have the variable charge strength S and have faster frequencies than what Farfetch'd have, yet they have a higher skill trigger rate. It's really not that high of a skill trigger rate for a non-skill specialist. So to say these sorts of things is just kind of rambling and making statements about concepts that he doesn't necessarily know the broader implications of the information behind it, the studies, that the research that could go into it. He's just talking, which once again, he makes great content, makes great daily content. He plays the game and enjoys it. He has a large community behind him of people that love him, but I think when he talks about these things, he's a bit more casual, and he's coming at things with the casual player's perspective, not the min-maxer's perspective that actually care about these things. If you're a min-maxer, I would take his perspective with a grain of salt. Now, the next one that I wanted to discuss is him with Musharna. Now, this one, I almost made a video on this one a while back when he actually released this one, but I didn't want to create drama, so I saved it all for when making this overall YouTube video. And let's just get into a couple clips that I pulled from his Musharna video. So this is the first one.
We know what we need to know about Mana and Musharna now. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that real quick, just so that you can decide if Mana and Musharna are going to be worthwhile capturing for your team, and I think they will be.
So he's making the statement right away that Mana and Musharna are probably going to be worth the investment for you. And that's an alright statement to be made, but there's got to be reasons behind it if you're trying to convince people that you should invest in Muna or Musharna. And what are his reasons? Well, let's get into the first thing.
I think it's going to be pretty good. The ingredient finding rate, a little bit high for my liking, but, 19.7, not too bad. If it was an ingredient specialist, this would be a little bit low, but it's kind of high for a berry specialist. Kind of wish it was closer to 15%, but it is what it is. I think it's...
So, this actually isn't necessarily about why he thinks it's good, but he talks about the ingredient rate. He goes on quite a while about the ingredient rate on Muna being 19.7%. Now, first off, I've talked about before how ingredient rate on berry specialists really doesn't matter all that much. It's kind of a slight negative, but it can be counteracted. If you're using those ingredients as part of a meal, then it's actually almost a good thing to have a higher ingredient rate because you're actually getting more value out of those ingredients than the berries. So it's already being based off of a more flawed concept about berry specialists. But even if, let's take his claim and compare it to reality. If we go through the Pokedex, he said that that's got a high ingredient rate, and that's going to hold Muna back. 19.7% was the amount that he said was high. That's way down here in terms of compared to all other berry specialists in the game. That's in the bottom 50%. That's not a very high ingredient rate for a Berrymon. In fact, he also said at one point, I'd much rather see that it's closer to 15%. Well, if that's his threshold, then the only berry specialist that has a reasonable ingredient rate, according to Lambo Sleeps, is Onyx. Because even Steelix has 15.4%. The man does not understand these numbers. He is a very casual player. Once again, is alright. No criticism there. But if you're trying to min-max the game, he doesn't know the numbers. And he shouldn't be trusted for a min-maxer's perspective. He didn't even make this comparison beforehand, just said, I'd like 15%. 15% would be extraordinarily low. Like I said, the only berry specialist in the entire game that has that low of an ingredient finding rate is Onyx specifically. Next thing.
And then the skill trigger rate is 4.3%, like I said a minute ago. Kind of high for Very specialist.
Now, what's funny with this clip is he says 4.3% is kind of high for a berry specialist, which he actually says that about Farfetch, but let's just go on a little bit longer.
Surprisingly high to me, but I also don't sit here and examine all of their skill trigger rates, so maybe I'm just, a bit blinded by ignorance, but I do think this is a bit high. And
he admits, he admits that he doesn't examine all the skill trigger rates in this clip. So it's just another thing to go into the point that he's coming at it with a more casual player's perspective and doesn't necessarily know all of these numbers when he's talking about it. Should he be making those conversations if he doesn't know the numbers? Use your discretion there on your judgment if he should be to begin with. But 4.3%, once again, really not that high of a skill trigger rate. If we go back to the comparison that I made before, it's a little bit higher than a lot of other things, but there are plenty of things that have a higher trigger rate than it. Additionally, because the skill is Dream Shard Magnets, there really is no comparison to make as far as it is for Musharna, because there's no other non-skill specialists that have that main skill to be able to make that statement. But additionally, once again, it really matters what the main skill is, as well as what the frequency is. And in this case, 4.3%, really not that high, because we're looking at an hour, 35-minute frequency, because he's evaluating for Muna. He's not even evaluating for Musharna, which I don't know why he decided to evaluate off these stats, other than just to make content, but that's the problem there. Now, next clip, we're talking about Musharna, finally.
I think as long as we can get berry finding and some speed, we're pretty good. But with this base frequency, maybe speed isn't really super necessary as I thought it would be just based on Muna's frequency. But still definitely nice to have. So definitely not going to complain about that. But I think as long as we can get...
Now, this clip is one that makes me almost kind of cringe, because it's one of the most common myths that a lot of people have out there, that if a Pokemon has a relatively high base frequency, which Musharna's base frequency is actually perfectly average. It's like right on like the most common frequency we see in the game. The theory is that if a Pokemon has a higher or a lower base frequency, is much faster, then you don't need speed because it's already fast. That's strictly false. Every Pokemon in the game, whether slow or fast, benefits equally from a frequency modifier, because their percent increases to productivity. When dealing with percents, it doesn't matter what the base number is. The frequency is still modified by the same percent. So you do need frequency on a Musharna if you want to invest it. The fact that it's got a base frequency of 46 minutes and 40 seconds makes zero impact as to whether or not helping speed will be useful on this Pokemon. Okay, next clip. Oh, that's actually not another clip. It's the full-length video. So that's everything that I really had to comment about Lambo Sleeps. So now, the last creator that I wanted to talk about was iBenBrown Plays Pokemon Sleep. Now, I'll be honest, I think that one thing that iBenBrown does much, much better than I do is considering new players' perspective. Is considering the fact that everybody's account is different. I think that he does a very good job at bringing in new players' perspectives and the perspective of, hey, maybe actually consider this. Maybe this is a bit more expensive. Maybe just ignore this. I think he does a very good job at taking a much more pragmatic and a practical approach to the game. So honestly, his videos would be one that I would genuinely recommend to most players. I think that he does the best job, even better than myself, in terms of considering all perspectives. But even he has a daily journal or like he shows off his account, and even he has certain Pokemon that have treated him well throughout the course of the game than others. Now, I'll bring attention specifically to his Golduck video, just because he basically made that video to discuss a lot of people I think are underrating Golduck. Would he have made that video if he didn't have particular success with it on his account? Probably not. So he's still going to trend towards the Pokemon that have done him best, not necessarily the Pokemon that are best for everybody's account. Because, you know what? If you just take the advice that's put out in this Golduck video, and you have a really solid Espeon that you have already invested, and you go and invest a Golduck because you know what? The high trigger rate and the high engagement level of requirement, that high engagement that is needed in order to optimally use Golduck, not being that big of an impact. Oh, Golduck's actually not that bad. If you decide to invest a Golduck at that point, you're making a mistake if you already have the Espeon, if you already have the Ampharos, if you already have the Berry Specialists. So you still should be taking whatever YouTubers, even the ones that do the best, at considering everybody's perspective. You should still be taking what they say with a grain of salt to consider what is actually best for your account and what are your specific needs. Additionally, consider where that person comes from. Do they come from a place where they have more resources and are ready to spend? Or do they come from the perspective of someone who's checking the app every 20 minutes? Or do they come from the perspective of somebody who wants to take a break and is just kind of letting the phone idle in the background? Because those 3 different playstyles are going to have very different Pokemon that do well, and have very different Pokemon that they'll be suggesting to you because it'll be what they've had success with. But anyway, that's what all I really wanted to discuss when it comes to Pokemon Sleep YouTube. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Down in the description, we'll have a link to join the Discord. You can come join us, hang out, talk about all things Pokemon Sleep and the like. If you want to become a channel member and show your support financially and are financially capable of doing so, I give you a huge thank you. And the option is down below for anyone who wants to join that hasn't already. And as always, I thank you all for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.